Okay, we're recording. So welcome all again. And I'm thanking you again for having me in your class. My name's Virginia Carter. I run a bushland restoration business called Local Habitat, specialising in bushland restoration works, environmental education and consultancy. And today we're going to be learning about the principles and techniques of sensitive bushland restoration works. So we'll be focusing on the key principles and methods of bushland regeneration following the Bradley method. So the Bradley method's a strategic method of weed control designed to protect the biodiversity of the remnant bushland using minimal herbicides and creating minimal disturbance. So by understanding these principles and methods, you'll be able to plan weed control works sensitively and strategically, ensuring the integrity of the bushland is maintained and enhanced. So again, this session is going to run for about 40 minutes like the previous one, and we'll be discussing the key principles of bushland restoration and how to prioritise and plan your works. Then I've put it together another presentation we'll be watching, which we've got sort of filmed some on-ground works for you to get an idea of the materials and equipment used. And then again, have a general discussion. So please, while I'm talking, any questions, and if I don't notice on the chat line, if anyone wants to draw my attention to those questions, they're welcome. And we'll kick off. Large thickets of blackberry. If you were to remove that blackberry in 1 year, you could be depleting nesting sites and protection from predators for our small birds and ground-dwelling marsupials. So you really want to stage and plan that removal. You could stage it over several years and then wait for natural regeneration of indigenous plants to replace the weeds and do it slowly and staged. So you're ensuring the integrity of the habitat is still there. That structure of habitat is maintained. So another example is owls. So I was working in a site not long ago and there was an owl roosting in a pittosporum. So pittosporums have quite a dense canopy, and owls like that to roost this time of year over winter, spring. If an owl is roosting, it generally means it's the male, and the female will be in a hollow close by with the chicks, the eggs or the chicks. So what the male does, he sets up a perch close by to the hollow tree and protects that hollowed out tree from any predators. So you can imagine if you're sent in to control pittosporum in that area and you come across an owl perching, you definitely want to walk away from that site. So what we tend to do is we map it, record what we've found, take a photo if we can, and quickly remove ourselves from the area so we don't disturb that breeding process, and then plan to remove it later down the track if it's not used in the future. But you can imagine by treating that, you could really disturb a whole breeding process. And that was a powerful owl that was sitting in that pittosporum. So, yeah, the main message here is look around before commencing any works. We also want to plan and strategise. So weeding is very time-consuming and very expensive. So you really want to prioritise your works and the key areas to work in. So long-term plans are ideal. That's what we really want to work under. It's taken well over 100 up to 200 years for a lot of sites to become degraded, and there is no quick fix. You can't expect to restore an area in 1 or 2 years. You want to really plan for long-term works. So before commencing any works, you want to familiarise yourself with the conditions of the site and identify the factors that are contributing to the decline of the bush. So you want to define the causes of the weed infestations. And this is going to help to strategize your weed control efforts. So you may want to check the adjacent properties. This is maybe where the weeds are coming in, or the bushland area you're working in may be where the weeds are coming from. But you need to know that. So an example of that is, it was actually on the photo points I showed you earlier. It was a bushland block we were working on to start to treat those pittosporum on the edge. So that just points out the significance of looking around you and really planning your weed control to ensure you're not creating a weedier environment. So I suppose I always say every action has a reaction, and it's our job to educate ourselves and be able to predict the implications of our actions. So don't rush in, go slowly, and observe the effects of your weeding. That's a key point. So the objectives of bushland restoration is to encourage natural regeneration of existing species and increase habitat value for our native fauna. So that's why we're weeding, not just for weeding's sake. And there's three main principles of bushland restoration. I, of course, have added a fourth that we can talk about. But the first one is always start from your higher quality areas and extend these areas outwards. I cannot stress this more. So it's the most valuable work we can do, retaining and restoring what is left of our high quality intact remnant vegetation. So you can spend a lot of time working in your weedy areas at the expense of neglecting your high quality remnant bushland. So you want to start in these high quality areas and expand your works out from there. And this allows recruitment of the native species from your high quality area out into the lower quality areas. There are exceptions to this rule, like there always are, and that's isolated patches of highly invasive species. So if you go into an area of bushland and you want to know how to prioritise work, yes, you prioritise your high quality areas, but there may be 2 small patches of English ivy throughout the bush. This is a really invasive species. It's really difficult to control and takes a lot of time and money to control. So if we can prioritise those 2 small areas and just eradicate that infestation straight away, that's another thing to prioritise. So the second, any questions on that? No, none come up on the chat box? No. Okay.
I do have kind of a broad question.
Yeah.
Which might not be 100% relevant, but how do you avoid trampling all those little things while you're trying to remove the big things?
That's a really good question, Belinda. We're really conscious when we're wearing our big heavy work boots that we've got hard hoofs. So we're always conscious of where we step, especially when you're in high quality areas. So we like to meander around, know where your orchid sites are, tread gently. We need to be in there and we need to get in and weed. But you're very conscious of that. The minimal disturbance is really what you want to apply. So I'll go through later weeding techniques that are carried out with minimal disturbance to the environment, but the actual trampling, it's being conscious of where you are. Some people like to take one track in and one track out, so they're only disturbing one area, and other people like to meander a different track each time, so you're not wearing out one section. So it really is site dependent, but tread gently and being very conscious of what's on the ground cover. Always look down. I'm always looking down. What's there? What's there? What am I trampling on? But yeah. So,
Great.
and the next actual principle is make minimal disturbance. So often when we're weeding, we can disturb the soil. So we're opening up the ground to weed invasion. So we really want to make minimal disturbance. So instead of like pulling out a sapling like of woody weed, a young tree, often we can just cut at the base. Some of the woody weeds don't require any poison, like sallow wattle or polygala or pines. So we can just cut that at the base without ripping out, or we can frill it. So I use a tomahawk, and I can show you examples of that later, and just frill that sapling, leave it standing. So that really creates minimal disturbance. If you're pulling out a woody weed, you can imagine if there's orchids or herbs, you often remove them too and gouge them out, and then you're opening up like the soil for weed invasion and weed seeds to come in. So minimal disturbance is the next second principle. And then the third's never overclear. So overclearing can denude habitat values and make natural regeneration in some cases impossible. So we kind of touched on that earlier. So woody weeds are much often easier to identify than other weeds, and they can appear to be the best thing to do for the bush, rush in and clear out the woody weeds such as Pittosporum or sallow wattle. And these very weeds may be helping you in your attempts at regeneration. So by clearing the shade of the canopy, we create a radical change in light conditions. And that can create a more favoured environment for weeds lurking close by. So you don't want to overclear. You want to be really strategic. Think about the effects of your work. And not all weeding's positive. So we try and predict the results of the works we carry out. And the fourth one I've put in is follow up, follow up, follow up. So it's just not a matter, bushland regeneration is not a matter of weed and walk away. Once a site's been weeded, the area needs to be monitored and managed. So once the weeds are treated, seeds remaining in the soil will regenerate. So we need to plan to follow up and consolidate all works before commencing new projects. And that can often, a lot of people get carried away. They've done one area, they're into the next area. That's becoming weedier, the previous works area, and they've opened up hectares and hectares that require weed control, and the budget mightn't be increasing. So you really want to plan to the amount of hours you've got and be as strategic as possible. So even if you're on a bush crew, I often, when I worked for different bush crews, would ask how many hours do we have on this site per year and how many years do we have on this site? It's really important to know, because if you have 1 year and you need to walk away, then you need to plan accordingly. If you know this is like a 10-year project, you can be really strategic. So any questions about that? No? This is a terrific book. So when I talked about the Bradley method...
Sorry, there's one in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
What were you saying you do with the tomahawk to a weed?
Okay. Well, we're about to go into a presentation where I'm using the tomahawk, so I'll show you, and I've brought my tools into the office so I can also show you what tools I use and how you just need a simple, small array of tools to be able to control most weeds. When I was talking about the Bradley Principle of Bushland Regeneration, this is a terrific book, so I'll put this up later for you. It's called Bringing Back the Bush, the Bradley Method of Bushland Regeneration.
It's on my Booktopia wish list. I haven't bought it yet, though.
Well, it's kind of the one book it's one of the main core books I would recommend being in the conservation industry.
Yep.
When it comes to methods and principles. Okay, so we've got through the question. I'm going to go stop recording.